Today we're going to talk about fitness in motocross, and we're going to talk about it from a little bit different perspective than what most people are used to, and it's a little bit more academic, but that's what the sport needs right now to grow. And we're going to start off with talking about what we think we know, and then we're going to talk about what we really actually do know, and then how are we putting some of those pieces of the puzzle together in order to create a complete program, or at least complete the idea of what is needed for fitness in motocross. So we'll start with kind of the topic of what do we think we know. And what we think we know is typically based on opinions. And everyone seems to have a different opinion, or at least their own opinion, to put it the least, about training in motocross. Recently, I asked on Facebook, what are some people's ideas and thoughts about how they train for motocross from the physical perspective, and I got a host of answers. It ranged from everything from just do cardio on the bicycle, spend more time riding more motocross and forget about everything else, buy my program, lift light weights, lots of reps. So there's a variety of ideas out there and thoughts, and those are opinions, and I think that those opinions tend to be based around someone's experience, and that experience is typically a result of them finding something that is more or less their weakness. Stephen Gall, recently he was interviewed on Gypsy Tales, and he was talking about his time working with James Stewart, and he talked about running the beep test. Now, I did a quick review of Stephen Gall's history and his education, and to my knowledge, I couldn't find him being a PhD or a master's of anything in sports science or exercise science. So in that, I'm going to take a little bit of a hit to him on this, where running the beep test, he talked about how James Stewart sucked at it. And so because James Stewart sucked at the beep test, then that must have meant that he wasn't really fit, and that everything James Stewart was doing was based upon his skill. Well, fitness is also specific to the task. So if James Stewart does, depending on which type of beep test he did, if it's something where you had to run to a certain distance, cut and turn and run back, and you get there before the beep, how often do you think James Stewart is doing that? Probably never, right? So why would we think that he would be good at this, or that this test would be appropriate to measure his capability? Now, okay, it may be a widely researched test, but if someone's never done that task or never practices that skill, then it doesn't make sense. And it's typically used for field-based sports like soccer or football. It can be used sometimes in basketball. A lot of things where you're used to running, that is part of the sport. It has no science to prove that it's valid for any type of athlete that is on a machine or fixed on a bike or something of that sort. So then when it comes to training, you have guys like Alden Baker. Well, I put a bunch of question marks because no one really truly knows what he's doing down there or how he's running things. They don't publish any findings. They don't come out and try to help educate the rest of the industry. They don't make an effort to help everyone else grow with their experience and understanding there. So it's a bit of a black box. I don't know. I can't say a whole lot about it. Therefore, what people talk about with Alden Baker knowing all that he's doing and et cetera, tends to be more or less people's opinions based on some little short snippet of video that they saw, or some little or small article that they read that got published on Racer X. Like, there's 100,000 things that go on in an elite sport athlete program that never get touched in any of those things. So truly, it's kind of opinion based, from people's observations of Alden Baker, and then Alden Baker himself and his program. They're not releasing stuff out to the public, so no one really knows. So an important thing is to define what do we really actually know when it comes to fitness and performance training for motocross. Well, in my exhaustive searches, and I've been doing this and trying to find research studies on motocross for at least 4 or 5 years. And at this point, I've only been able to come up with 10 studies even remotely related to the human performance aspect in motocross. There's a couple out there related to suspension stuff or different things about forces placed on the bike, that kind of stuff. But in terms of the rider, it's very little. Okay, these 10 research studies, almost every single one is a completely different topic related to human performance, and all they're really doing is just basically describing some things that they found. I found that basically heart rates were really high. Great, that tells me nothing, right? I found that guys had basically really strong grip strength. No duh. Everyone in motocross already knows that. So nothing truly defining or very informative. I easily found at least 50 plus research studies looking at injuries and surgery methods. That's a pretty well covered method or area, anyway, sorry, in research. Now, zero of any of that research states how or does anything to prove how you should be training for the sport. So they have a little bit of description about here's what we saw, here's what we think the body is responding to, but we have no way to fully prove it. Okay, there's levels of difficulty to that process, and then because of that, there is nothing that states how do we actually train for the sport. So really, in the end, what do we really actually know? The answer is a big giant zero. We really don't know exactly how to train this sport. Okay, and that's speaking from a academic scientific standpoint, right? There's definitely some things that we can put together that help us cover all the bases, but we can't say that we definitively 100% know how to train for this sport. So let's do a real quick review of some of the current scientific findings and pulling some of those pieces together to then figure out what do we need to do. So in road racing, they found, looking at braking data, that riders can experience up to 230 pounds of force under braking. Now, of course, that's high-level road racing, right? Very high speeds. But I think it can be argued that in high-level elite motocross, there will be the same amount of forces experienced, or maybe even more. And I think there could probably be a good argument for more, but we can't prove it yet because one, the study hasn't been done, and two, some of the widely available information out there or access to tools that people use for the sport are really limited. So something like LitPro, it has some validity issues for a lot of reasons, and some of the values that they show when it comes to acceleration and other aspects, it doesn't really quite stand the test of time or research and science. Now, I won't dig into really far what that is, but I'll tell you there's probably at least 10 research studies out there that prove that the exact way and the type of device that they're using for assessing all that stuff in LitPro is not capable of doing what they say it's doing. It's very inaccurate. So it is probably within a reasonable margin for the average person for tracking lap times. That's probably fine. But anything past that, no. And even still then, they will claim only when you ask them directly that there is a 2-second plus or minus error rate with their lap times. So that still can be quite a bit of an issue at the top pro level. What we do know is heart rates before a race are significantly high. They're somewhere in like the 120s, 130s, maybe some guys even higher. And then during a race, heart rates can be sustained around 80 to 90% of a person's max heart rate. The challenge is, what does that mean? Well, in reality, it doesn't mean a whole lot because there are a lot of factors that are influencing that heart rate, right? Your anticipation, all the excitement, the adrenaline, there's all these hormonal factors that are elevating it before you've even done anything. So you're already starting at a very high level. Then you're not moving the same way or exercising the same way that, say, a soccer player does or a basketball player or basically any other traditional sport, right? So the response that your heart is giving, it's not entirely specific the way that it's generally referred to in most cases. Most times, if you're about 80 to 90% of your max heart rate, you're working extremely hard. You're putting in all this effort. It's not that you aren't in motocross, right? But the way that it's described for that 80 to 90% of max heart rate when you're running or sprinting can be a completely different type of work than what's occurring on the bike. So it doesn't tell us a whole lot, but it does give us something, right? It says that your ability to deal with expelling all that bad byproduct that's being built up and that general aerobic endurance is pretty important, right? And then forearm strength of motocross riders is greater than recreational athletes. Well, that's not world changing at all, but that's the only real conclusion that has been done with any scientific research. So it would be much more interesting if it was compared to, say, like an O lineman in the NFL or a rock climber or something of that sort. So it's very limited in findings. So what can we understand directly from the sport to help us with deciding how to train? Well, heart rates are high for long periods of time. And as we've already discussed, heart rate values are not necessarily specific, right? So it is challenging to derive that into something really topic focused. But what it does mean is that if heart rates are high for a long period of time, we do have a certain amount of aerobic and anaerobic and alactic capacity that we need to be able to deal and cope with. And we know that, at least in, let's say, specifically motocross, outdoor nationals, a race is 30 minutes and we're going to have to do it twice. So there's something, right? Again, it's influenced by the hormonal aspect. That's going to elevate your heart rate. Heat, right? We have all our gear on. It's Loretta's. It's 95. It's 90% humidity. There is some research looking at long-term isometric exercise having a significant influence on spiking heart rate. Again, some of this kind of unspecific type of things. We know from some of that research, looking at the braking data from road racing, there's an immense amount of force placed on the body. And when we look at motocross, you look at hitting the jumps, you hit a whoop section, accelerating, braking, responding to terrain, braking bumps, dealing with all that, right? There's an insane amount of force that's put on the body. So with that, strength does matter. I know a lot of people in the sport are afraid to lift heavy weights. Strength does matter. And that strength and that heart rate, okay, they go hand in hand. And that physiology that occurs within those, there is a giant relationship between those things. It is not just you have to be an endurance specific type of athlete, right? Most people think of endurance training for an athlete being something like doing like 30 lightweight dumbbell lunges, right? Well, you know what an endurance lift is like for an NFL athlete? It's 60% of his 1 rep max, so maybe like 275 or 300 on the bar for a back squat, and then another like 225, 230 or more on a barbell for a chest press, and going back doing 1 rep, 1 rep, 1 rep, 1 rep, and doing that for 6 minutes. That's what I think of for an NFL athlete doing an aerobic workout, right? So it's relative, right? And we can say pretty clearly now that strength matters. We know the duration of the sport is long, okay? 30 minutes nonstop is a lot of work. There's no stop and start other than crashing. And then cognitive stress is high, right? Mental stress being high, that can elevate the hormonal aspects of the heart rate, all this stuff coming together. But cognitive stress can really make the recovery last longer, because that mental stress can slow down a lot of other aspects of recovery in the body. So we have to be able to cope and deal with that. So how does training work then? Well, we're going to get a little bit mathematical here. We're going to get a little bit scientific. We're going to get into some nuts and bolts of strength and conditioning. Now, we're not going to get really deep into the aerobic and cardiovascular conditioning, because that is a lot more nuanced than what people realized. That is the stuff that is actually really hard to put together at a really advanced level. Most people watching this video, most people riding motocross, keep it simple. Plain and simple. Do not go overboard with trying to make that something super elaborate. Do it, and that's it to start with. So, but let's get into that strength piece, because I know that that's where a lot of people have issues and hesitate in this sport. But I think if you're a lot stronger and you're able to deal with that force significantly better, you'll find you won't necessarily need to go through some of that conditioning the same way. So say that 230 pounds of force that we experience under braking happens 300 times in a race, right? So your body is absorbing a total of 70,000 pounds in just one race under braking alone. That's a lot of work. Now, probably a lot of motocross riders can't even squat 230 pounds. Not that that's necessarily a standard, okay? But let's say that that 230 pounds of force as our standard for this example, right, is someone that is weak. And I would classify that as weak. And they can do that only a max of 5 times. So they can do 1 rep and then another rep and take a rest and another rep and rest and another rep, and they can do it 5 times, and that's it before they're done. And that's 90% of their max. Now, that's considered strength for that person. That is a strength exercise. That is near their max strength. A strong rider can squat maybe 450 pounds, and he can do 5 reps of it. He does 1 rep, rests, does another rep, rests, etc., etc. So now for that guy, 230 pounds is now somewhere in the ballpark of about 55-60% of his 1 rep max. You know what that means? Just like the NFL example before, that's an endurance workout now. Him doing 230 pounds, that's lightweight high reps. Now, the people generally have this fear that getting really strong like that means you're going to get really big and you're going to be heavy, and I need to set up my bike and blah blah blah. You don't have to be that big and heavy to lift as much weight as you think. So large strength does not equal increased body weight. Okay, I was 155 pounds. I could do 5 sets of 2 reps at 335 with a box jump and then some other little corrective exercises in between and repeat. Okay, at 155 pounds. That's probably most guys, maybe like half the guys in the 250 class. right? And then the 450s, they put on a couple pounds, maybe 165, 170 ish to be able to deal with the bike. So if you're putting on that weight, you can put on that strength. Now, as far as programming your overall training, I think that that's where there's bigger issues. People don't understand that the conditioning, the strength, the mobility, everything, the motos, the extra bike rides, all of that comes together, and it needs to all be a part of the program, not just one thing. So in very simple terms, we'll kind of go through off-season, preseason, and then during season. How does training look during those times? Right, in the off-season, that is your time to get strong. Lift big, lift fast, heavy lifts in gym, fast lifts in the gym, and doing short motos. You don't have to stop riding, just keep motos short. We don't need super long motos. You want the program, all the pieces to complement each other and build upon the same requisite skill of fitness. Preseason, we move over to a little bit more strength endurance and a mix of more long endurance. Moderate weight, higher reps in the gym, right? Now, again, we talked about how that's relative. That moderate weight, high reps for you could be 230 pounds, or it could be 60. This is also a good time for introducing some of the longer bike rides, and then a time for medium to long duration motos, right? Everything kind of progressively builds. Right? The off season, you started with all that strength and power, things were short, you got lots of recovery time, and then preseason, there's a little bit less recovery time, but things are a little bit longer. It's building, right? And then in season, we want to maintain those qualities that we have. So the key with being able to maintain is exposure to strength, exposure to power, and exposure to endurance. Now, that means a little bit of some strength work throughout the week, a little bit of some power work throughout the week, a little bit of some endurance work throughout the week. And then at that point in time, you're spending a lot more focused time on riding on the track and racing. So those things should supplement and help maintain the overall fitness. But if you don't go in the gym or do the specific work to express those qualities, you're going to lose them. So that will then take away from your overall performance. So that's how a very simple season can be planned. So in the end, who am I? Why does anything I say matter? Well, you're going to have to take that for a grain of salt for yourself. But my background, I'm a strength coach and sports scientist. I've won 4 trophies in the MLS, worked with over 200 plus professional athletes. I also ride motocross. I won't say I race by any means, but I definitely love getting out to the track and burning some laps and trying to pretend like I'm fast sometimes. What I'm bringing and what I'm trying to do for the sport is bring some real science and really try to find out what are the answers and put things together that can then help everyone in the entire motocross community get better. That can help everyone enjoy the sport more because they're better and more specifically capable of handling the work. They can then ride at a higher level. Maybe we can even prevent some crashes from happening because someone has a stupid crash because they were just really tired because they weren't prepared properly to ride. There's a lot of different scenarios, but plain and simple, I want to help sport grow. I want to take it to a new level, and again, help everyone else in the sport take it to a new level. And just some quick notes coming soon. I'll have a website, lewishighperformance.com. On there, it'll be, selling some of my services in terms of sports science and strength and conditioning, not just to the motocross community, but a lot of youth sports programs, high schools, and so on. We will be having a mobile app at some point for training and sports science monitoring for athletes. Obviously, there's a lot of ins and outs to that, but it's really nice to have a mobile app capable platform and program, especially in the current world with COVID. So it's somewhat COVID proof and allows you to still get your work done. And there'll be more educational videos coming. There'll probably be links and things on that website, and a lot of other educational pieces in how we're planning really specific aspects of training. Maybe for motocross, it might be for other sports, and just general sports science information. So stay tuned for that, hopefully here in the next couple weeks. And I look forward to hopefully meeting a lot of you guys watching this video.